Good afternoon, everyone. It's Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So that means it's Fast Facts and Features with me, the Brandon Batheder. I'm so excited about today's topic. I'm tripping over my words now, Kevin. I'm
It's
so
live.
excited.
You can't start over again. It's
Me,
live, so too bad.
no, push button rewind. Please be kind and rewind this or go fast forward. No, it should be fast forward as I'm tripping over my words. Oh my gosh, how are you today, Kevin, on this sunshiny day again?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Really well. Thank you.
Awesome. So we're in part 2 of our components used in the hardwood flooring installation, and you brought beautiful props last time to understand what a nail down or cleat down floor was all about and the evolution of where it started. And now fast forward a couple of years when the advent of glue is being used in hardwood floor installation. So I'm going to get you to first of all talk about the wrong glues to use, number one. Number two is what, first of all, is the glue that or second, I should say, second for that hardwood floor, floating floor, and what somebody wants to look forward to or to be able to use. Okay.
Awesome. Well, what not to use is that's pretty simple, but it seems not to be in a lot of people's mind because they go to the Home Depot or what have you, and there's a whole aisle of glues, and I'm a glue weirdo, so I get all excited to look at what they do and what they are. But you want something that says hardwood flooring adhesive on it. All glues are not created equal, and they have very different properties for very different uses. And a hardwood floor needs a very, very specific type of adhesive that obviously is permanent and very, very strong, so that the boards don't come apart. But it also needs to have some sort of elastomeric properties to it, because as we know, hardwood floors change shape with the changes in the temperature and humidity. So you can't just buy whatever you happen to see on the shelf that looks like it's going to work, because there's a high chance that it might not.
So tell us, what's the difference between carpenter's glue, because hey, I'm using it for wood, and glue used for hardwood floor?
Yeah, again, it's that elastomeric property. If you're building a chair or whatever you might happen to do, yeah, there's wood and it's going to move, and it needs to be more elastic, but you're probably more concerned of absolute total hardness at that point to keep everything together. That being said, I'm not a woodworker, so somebody might prove me wrong. But I know for sure that with an engineered hardwood floor where you're doing a large, potentially you're doing a whole 1,000-square-foot condominium, and it's all hardwood and it's all connected just simply at this little tongue and groove. When you change in temperature, let's say in the winter it gets down to -10 and relative humidity gets down to 20% within the condo, let's say, and that floor wants to shrink and will shrink quite significantly. You need an adhesive that is going to go with that movement, so to speak, while keeping the floor tight and together. So it's not an easy task, and the chemical formulation to make that happen has obviously been tried and tested and has evolved over time. And the industry has gone from using more general purpose glues. Like when I was a young man and started, and I asked the installers what they're using, and they're like, PL 400, an old construction adhesive, was used for everything. And as the years have gone by, we've seen more and more specialty products that are made for the exact specific properties of hardwood flooring.
So I'm just going to show everybody, because I'm a geek about relative humidity, like I'm a geek about weather and temperature and relative humidity, as you are with glue. And I actually have on my desk, this is a Honeywell that talks about the humidity and look at this. It's so dry in my little cottage that it says low. And I have hardwood floor here. It's an engineered about 4.25-inch hardwood floor in my place, my little cottage here. And definitely I'm seeing that the cracks are definitely bigger. And thank goodness they glued this down, or else I'm sure it would be a lot worse than what it is. But so it's something that... Go ahead.
These are the realities that hardwood flooring has to live through, right? And it's
Mhm.
it's extremely difficult, and it can be described as a torturous environment, right? So the product, i.e. the glue that you choose to either glue it together or to glue it down to the subfloor is so critical. And unfortunately, it's not the norm in the industry that everybody's so aware of these things and dives into these in great detail. But yeah, the longer I've done this, the more I realize what a hard life in a hardwood floor, being still a
Mhm.
living, breathing product. And we have it fairly easy in Vancouver, where our climate is generally considered, on the easier side regarding a hardwood floor, whereas Calgary and the prairies, they have such
Mm.
extreme swings of cold with low humidity, and then they have, Toronto has high temperatures with really high humidity. So even what I've seen in my career, which has been a lot, I know that my colleagues in other parts of the country have it, much, much harder. And it becomes even more important to make sure you're using the right product, both with the floor itself and with your installation materials.
And remind us all out there a telltale sign that the wrong glue was used in a hardwood floor installation. What's the number one telltale sign?
Cracking or noise and bond failure, which is a fancy way of saying that the glue let go. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's if somebody used a rigid type adhesive would be the most common issue. Let's say you used a tongue and groove glue, and you glued that tongue and groove together, and you used a really hard set adhesive. Initially it's going to hold hard, which is great. But as that floor wants to pull apart or shrink, if it can't move with that and it literally cracks, now you have zero bond in between
Mm-hmm.
that tongue and groove. And the floor will separate at that point, or it'll make crunching noises as it kind of moves around with half the glue still working and as you walk across it. So it's pretty obvious and it's pretty catastrophic. And once it happens, like I tell my team, a glue failure is the absolute worst type of failure you can have, because the entire floor is affected and there's generally no way to fix it other than removing it all and doing it again. So buying and using the best quality glues that you can get your hands on is really
Mm-hmm.
smart. And it brings to mind, right when I was a young man, I'll just share this, Jeanette. There's an older gentleman who's passed on now, but he was a flooring rep for 40 or 50 years. And right when I started, he came to me, he says, "Kevin, I'm going to give you a bit of advice in this industry." And I said, "Oh, sure." I'm like a sponge. I'm soaking things up, right? Pat Breslin was his name. He was really, really commonly known. He was a mainstay in Vancouver flooring for half a century. He said, "There's two things you'll never save money on." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he says, "Cheap labor and cheap glue." And he says,
Mm.
that's because you're going to have to do it again. And that's really expensive. And I said, "Oh," I didn't really understand what he meant at the time, but very quickly I did, as I ran into cheap labor and cheap and inappropriate glue. So thank
Yeah,
you, Pat.
exactly.
You're no longer with us, but he's guided those little words of wisdom 20 years ago has guided me all of these years since.
So we've talked about now we're going to get to glue down a hardwood floor, both on concrete and on plywood. Let's go to I know this conversation is going to carry on for a couple of Wednesdays because it's a big topic for us.
Mm-hmm.
We've now got the concrete prepped. We've done our subfloor prep to what the manufacturer is saying it's got to be to, quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch to a 10-foot span. And now we're ready to use glue. Is there something that needs to go down first, or what has been the evolution of glue? Because I've often heard, much like hardwood floor, concrete may get to its right, moisture content, but there still could be moisture in the concrete that could affect the whole process. So let's talk about that little bit of a step before we're involving the glues.
Yeah, that's been one of the biggest technological advances, I'd say, in the last, in maybe in my career. That's changed the game in terms of hardwood floor installation. And you're right, back in the day, the glues, the hardwood glues. So we're talking full spread glue down. So we're troweling out the whole floor in adhesive and putting the boards into it. That's called a full spread. And previously, and oftentimes, concrete is higher in moisture content than we want, or that the glue can handle, or the manufacturers of the flooring product want. So there used to be this two-step process where if the moisture content was slightly elevated in the concrete, okay, so you would seal it first, and then you would apply your glue. That had to dry, and then you'd have to, the next day come back and actually glue out the floor. So with the latest generation, that was common with the urethane-based adhesives of yore, which are really not used anymore. When the new generation of silane-based adhesive came out, they are a moisture barrier and adhesive in one product, up to almost every foreseeable circumstance. There are still times when it's even elevated beyond the adhesive's ability to handle, then we have to look at a secondary product. But for 99% of our installs, the hardwood floor adhesive is acting as a full quality moisture barrier. And all of these instances of moisture coming up from the subfloor and destroying a hardwood floor they're eliminated. I can't think of one since we've switched to this new generation of silane-based adhesive about 5 years ago. Yeah. So major change. And us being ethical flooring, if we needed to put down the moisture barrier prior, even if it was a second step, we would still do that. But a lot of companies wouldn't, and you had destroyed hardwood floors all over the place. And you probably are still having that in people that are using some of these older technology glues that are, they may be cheaper, but we want that moisture protection, and we want that zero VOC component, which we get with the new generation that we're using.
And I'll loop it back to, we'll kind of finish this off, and then we'll continue next week more of the technical information about the adhesives themselves. Is looping back to what that original, I think you said his name was Pat, the icon in our industry, goes back to that good quality labor, because I can just think in a full spread glue, much like in a nail down or a cleated down floor, if the cleats weren't positioned in such a way that board is not going to stay stable as possible, that if you've got an installer who says, oh, I'm going to make ethical some floor, I'm going to make some money, and I'm just going to put just enough glue down to put the floor down, and then there's pockets where the glue isn't there, where you're going to get some issues. So I loop it back to, you can have all the best products in the world, that if your labor force isn't following the letter of the law to make sure that install goes correctly. Am I on the right track there?
You are 100%. And, we call that, every adhesive has a trowel size that is determined and necessary to leave the correct amount of adhesive on the subfloor before you put the wood in, and that's required to make sure that it works, right? And so one, you have to trowel out the whole floor, and then two, you have to use the right trowel. And it's comical, because the number of times I've seen, let's call them B-class subcontractors or contractors, people that have, they bought the floor from us and they hired another installer, or their contractors doing it for whatever reason, and that's legitimate, so that's fine. We don't have an issue with that as long as they do it right. But they'll come in and start, I have this trowel that's half the size of what it says in the bucket to use. Is that okay? Like, no, you can't leave half of the amount of adhesive on the floor and expect that it's going to work, right? And it's so the number of times that we've had people that had somebody, let's call them a B-level installer or a contractor, put in a floor, something catastrophic goes wrong, and they come back and hire us to redo it. And we will in this instance, because we sold them the floor originally, right? But the installation component of it is huge, and it's the vast majority of the important part of it. A really good installer could make a job work with kind of mediocre materials, but not the other way around. A mediocre installer can't do anything with the best materials in the world, right? So, but when you pair both of those together, which is what we try to do every day, then ultimately you have a happy client base.
Absolutely. I liken it to those of you watching this on the replay of making a cake. It'd be like saying, oh, I'm only going to put in half the amount of flour and you expect to still get a beautiful Black Forest cake to feed your family. It doesn't work. The math, the chemicals, the procedure works when the environment, components, tools, and the expertise that's putting in the floor all work together in order for you to have a really good glue down hardwood floor.
It's true. And it's, it's so important to follow the instructions and to have the expertise. And oftentimes that's earned through trial and error and learning the hard way, right? And nobody wants to do that, but it's part of building your skill set and your knowledge base. And so when we say to somebody, no, you really need to do this, they should trust in that that's based on real experience. They're like, there's a reason why we're suggesting that it's done that way. But this is where being a specialist trade comes in. Like we spend every day, all day learning and working with floors and learning the good way and the bad way. And, if you come to us, that's what you're getting, right? And there's other people that know a little bit about 12 different trades, and that's great. That's a whole nother career to be a general contractor. But when it comes to flooring, like I say, you really have to just do flooring to really become a specialist at it, because it is so much harder than it looks from the outside. So that's why we just do flooring. We thought about doing other things too, but we're just a flooring company, and that keeps our plate full, no doubt.
Perfect. So I'm going to say I will not see you later at Night Shift Street Ministries this Wednesday. Tonight, I will be out at the District Cloverdale Chamber of Commerce, Kevin. My company has been nominated for Business in Excellence in Philanthropy. So of giving back.
Wonderful.
So tonight I have a gala event to go to find out if my BC Consulting is going to win that award. But being nominated, it's much like how I brought you and your beautiful family into the fold to understand to give back. And that's part of business, is to practice philanthropic work in our community. So enjoy making your incredible sandwiches. I just loaded up Candace with a bunch of stuff that was donated by one of my friends from Provisions, Markets, and Gifts. So you're going to have a good time tonight with your family serving our street friends in Surrey. And
wonderful. All the best with your award there.
Thank you. So tune in next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, for another edition of Fast Facts and Features with me, the brand ambassador for Ethical Flooring. And we're going to get into a bigger sticky conversation next Wednesday. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.